Hello and welcome to PowerCultureCoco, home of the Coco. I have ideas. So today we're going to talk about this Harvard study demonstrating that women are naturally better credit risks and more cooperative stewards of resources than men are. But really the most interesting findings was how men's cooperation and trustworthiness were drastically affected by whether they were raised in a patriarchal or matrilineal society. On the other hand, women remained steady regardless of the culture that defined their social status as equal to men or inferior to men. And really, testosterone is likely a player in this phenomena too. So before we break down the Harvard study, let's watch this clip from Stanford professor and neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky explaining to us how testosterone actually works.
The trouble isn't that testosterone makes us aggressive. The trouble is that we reward aggression with status so readily. Okay, so now pushing further back, our behaviors occurred. What's relevant in the hours to days before? What do hormones have to do with what goes on here? Now, if we're talking about humans at their worst, right off the bat, we know which hormone to round up: testosterone. So what's the deal with testosterone? Why are males of every species and every culture such a pain in the rear on this planet here? It's because testosterone makes you aggressive. Testosterone doesn't make you aggressive. Here's what it actually does. Take 5 male rhesus monkeys, put them in a group, let them form a dominance hierarchy. A defeats B 3 times, B never defeats A. This is the hierarchy. Now take C and inject C with testosterone. Give C like so much testosterone, like every amygdaloid neuron is growing antlers, and that guy just enormous. So now does C get involved in more fights? Absolutely. Is this the pattern that occurs now? Is C suddenly challenging A and B and rising in the heart? Absolutely not. C never does a thing with A and B. What happens instead is C becomes a total nightmare to D and E. Testosterone does not invent aggression. Testosterone exaggerates pre-existing social patterns of aggression. And it turns out it does something even more subtle than that. And this is people beginning to realize what testosterone really does is when your status is being challenged, testosterone makes you do whatever you need to do to maintain status. Now, if you're a baboon and somebody's challenging your status, the way you maintain it is you have a fight with them. It's synonymous. But if you're human, things get more complicated. And for example, you can have an economic game where people get status by making generous offers and give people testosterone, and they become more generous in the game. In other words, if you shot up a whole bunch of Buddhist monks with testosterone, they would run amok doing random acts of kindness all over the place.
Interesting, right? So testosterone fuels aggression towards defending social status, as defined by the dominant value system of the culture that they are raised in, which makes a lot of sense, right? So within patriarchy, men are raised implicitly and explicitly to feel entitled to a higher status than all women all the time, which is always bananas, right? But men raised within a matrilineal culture where women have rights like inheriting property, making household decisions, resource decisions, right to bodily autonomy, all the good stuff, right? Those men demonstrate much more cooperative behaviors because they do not perceive women participating socially and with their own agency as a direct threat to their status as a man. Which makes sense, right? That absolutely makes sense. So with all of this in mind, let's get into this Harvard study. P.S. Like and subscribe, weekly videos, all sorts of good feminist stuff. So this Harvard study was looking at distinct cultures that participate in microfinance loans in Bangladesh. So microfinance is where small loans are offered to rural and impoverished communities that lack financial services to see if they can help disrupt cycles of extreme poverty. So worldwide, 70% of microcredit recipients are women. But this wasn't always the case. Initially, these loans were offered to men. But this was not that successful, right? Many men defaulted on the loans, and there was really no measurable reductions in poverty. Spending on gambling, nightlife, and ladies of the night did measurably increase in some regional studies, but there were no reductions in extreme poverty when men were the recipients of these microloans. So microfinance orgs began reaching out to women instead, and they found that women were much more successful with repaying the loans and also much more likely to invest that loan in small businesses like agricultural improvements to increase their output, right? And also to invest these resources into community needs and health and education resources and investments for their children. So we did actually see measurable reductions in poverty by targeting this towards women. And listen, microfinance is not a singular solution for disrupting poverty cycles. Absolutely not. But it has been successful and shown measurable reductions in extreme poverty in the hands of women, which is interesting, right? So let's get into this Harvard study. The Harvard study wanted to see if women were innately better credit risks and more cooperative with resources than men, or if this pattern was a result of socialized gender norms, right? Because a lot of these communities, not all of them, but a lot of the communities that they were working with are very patriarchal, right? And so if microcredit was the only avenue for a woman to access financial resources independently, well, then of course she was going to be much more careful with it, right? A much better steward with it, right? So the study went in to see if it was the socialization that was causing women to succeed so much, or if there was something innate about women that was causing this phenomena. Okay, I'm going to quote from the study here. The researchers in this study compare repayment behavior of men and women who come from two distinct patrilineal and matrilineal societies that are culturally similar. These are the Kashi and Patro communities in northeast Bangladesh. The Kasi have a matrilineal family structure and a matrilocal residence system. Women are the heads of the Kasi household, and children are known by their mother's family names. Only female children among the Kasis inherit ancestral property, and a Kasi husband has no authority over decision-making or distribution of power. The Kasis have lived side by side with members of another indigenous community, the Patro, for hundreds of years. The Patro community has a patriarchal family structure in which males are considered to be household heads and inheritors of property. And they also did this game with a third control community. This was the Marma, and they were considered a gender-neutral society, and they also live about 150 miles away from these two groups. So that's why it was a good control, you know? So the Marma are considered gender-neutral, right? So Marma men carry on the family line, right? But both male and female children have equal rights to inheriting ancestral property. Women live with their husbands' families after marriage, but men have to pay a bridal price to the bride's parents. And so for these and many other reasons, the Marmas were considered to be gender neutral. All right, so what did we find out from these games? Let's take a look. Women are better credit risks in both patriarchal and matrilineal societies, irrespective of whether the loan contracts stipulated joint or individual liability. Across the entire sample, the average repayment rate of women was 17 percentage points higher than that of men. Indeed, the authors found that women participants had better repayment rates in every society. Even when researchers controlled for age, education, marital status, and assets, females were more likely to repay their loans regardless of their social group. In matrilineal society, the average repayment rate of women was 12 points higher than the average repayment of men. In the patriarchal society, the average repayment rate of women was 30 points higher than that of men. In the control group, the gender-neutral society, women were 18 points more likely to repay than men. And all of these stats are controlling for demographic information, okay? And so the repayment rate of men appears to largely depend on what kind of society they were raised in. The average repayment rate of men in the matrilineal society was 17.5 percentage points higher than men in the patriarchal society, indicating a greater cooperative spirit in the matrilineal men. Interesting. Female borrowers, displayed better repayment behavior than males, irrespective of the roles they play in society and the nature of the loan. Men in matrilineal societies demonstrate much more cooperative behavior than men in patriarchal societies, which results in higher repayment rates. Interesting. And like that all makes sense, right? So while women are innately and naturally more trustworthy stewards of resources than men, men's capacity is largely determined by the culture that they were raised in. And this tracks with everything we just learned about testosterone, right? Makes total freaking sense. I'm trying to talk less like a sailor. Yeah, but this makes total sense. And this is a unique phenomena to men because it's largely probably tied to testosterone, right? So, right, super interesting study, right? And I think it also sheds some light on why misogyny seems to be getting so much worse. You know, as the entitlements to accessing women by virtue of the innate superiority of man's social status, as we continue to just be like, no dog, no dog, no dog. We are both people. We can be in relationship cooperatively as equals, but I will not be your lesser handmaiden BS, right? As we continue to hold that line, fight to restore rights that have been rescinded from women, and continue to push back against all of the misogynistic backlash and craziness occurring right now, as we hold our ground, we are ensuring that through the long arc of social change and culture, we are moving towards gender equality. And that is going to benefit rising generations. We cannot lose our ground. And that's why it's critical that we do not falter in the face of backlash to feminism. That's why we cannot stop. Acquiescing to demands for submission will not appease misogyny. It will only inspire more depraved standards. So it's worth fighting for gender equality, and it's critical for rising generations that we continue to do so. It's also so much better for men. More cooperative men is better for men's relationships with each other, with women, with society, with children, with the earth. Only good things happen from increasing our standards of cooperation. I promise you. So let's keep fighting the good fight together. I'm Coco. I have ideas. Thank you so much for your time. I always love to hear your thoughts. Drop a line in the comments and like and subscribe for more weekly videos. I have writings up at PowerCultureCoco.substack.com, and you can check me out on Instagram at PowerCultureCoco and over at TikTok at Coco Has Ideas. I'll see you guys next time.